Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to this slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get to tonight's reading, I'd like to bug you for a couple of minutes. Sleepy Time Tales is a purely listener-supported podcast. As I've mentioned recently, I have actually had a few offers of advertising, but although it was always a plan with Sleepy Time Tales, I decided a while ago not to pursue offers like that anymore, because I really don't want to put anything between me and the listener and their restful night's sleep. But as a result, I need your help if you can offer it. I can only keep Sleepy Time Tales going, pay for the services and tools that I use, and justify the time that I use on it thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. So if you find it helpful, if it helps you to get a restful night, and you would like to keep it going out to thousands of insomniacs just like you, please consider supporting it on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly help that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can also get you fun bonuses. So go along there, take a look, and sign up if you're interested. And if monthly seems like a big ask, which is something I completely understand, you can make once-off tips through the tip jar on the website. And if you'd like to help Sleepy Time Tales without having to do so financially, you can simply spread the word. If you know somebody who is struggling to sleep, just tell them about Sleepy Time Tales and let them give it a try. And that's enough of that. Let's carry on learning about the railway system and where it goes in the United Kingdom. We pick up this week with Rides on Railways by Samuel Sidney. And we continue our journey around the British railway system from Woburn and Bedford. Woburn is one of those dull places, neat, clean, and pretentious in public buildings, which are forced under the hothouse influence of a great political family. We pass it to visit Woburn Abbey, the residence of the Russell family, with its extensive and magnificent gardens, its model farms, its picture gallery, and other accessories of a great nobleman's country seat. It was at Woburn that Francis, Duke of Bedford, held his sheep-shearing feasts, and by patronizing, in conjunction with Coke of Norfolk and Mr. Weston, improvements and improvers in agriculture and stock breeding, did so much to promote agricultural improvement in this country, and to create that large class of wealthy, educated agriculturalists, which confers such great benefits on the country. Now that every country gentleman has at least one neighbor who is, or professes to be, an agricultural improver, it is difficult to give an adequate idea of the benefit we have derived from the agricultural enthusiasm of the noblemen and gentlemen who first made the science of cultivating breeding fashionable. We must be excused the word, among a class which had previously been exclusively devoted to field sports or to town life. They founded the finest of all modern characters, the English country gentleman, educated yet hearty, a scholar and a sportsman, a good farmer, and an intelligent, considerate landlord. happy to teach and ready to learn. Anything connected with the pursuit which he follows with the enthusiasm of a student and the skill of a practical man. The other stations have nothing about them to induce a curious traveller to pause. Not so can we say of Bedford. Bedford has been pauperized by the number and wealth of its charities. A mechanic or small tradesman can send his child, if it be sick, to a free hospital, when older to a free school, where even books are provided. When the boy is apprenticed, a fee may be obtained from a charity. At half the time of the apprenticeship, a second fee. On the expiration of the term, a third. On going to service, a fourth. If he marries, he expects to obtain from a charity fund a portion with his wife. Also educated at a charity, and if he has not sufficient industry or prudence to lay by for old age, and those are virtues which he is not likely to practice, he looks forward with confidence to being boarded and lodged at one of Bedford's 59 almshouses. The chief sources of the charities of Bedford is derived from an estate of 13 acres of land in the parish of St. Andrew, Holborn, London, bequeathed by Sir William Harper, an alderman of that city in the reign of Edward VI, for founding a free school for instructing the children of the town in grammar and good manners. This land, now covered with valuable houses, produces some £16,000 per annum. On this fund there are supported, first, a grammar school with 80 boys on the foundation and as many private boarders, a commercial school containing 100 to 150 boys, a national school of 350 boys, where on the half-holidays 170 girls are received, a regular girls' school, and an infant school. Beside which, the girls in the hospital for poor children, another branch of the charity, are taught household duties, needlework, reading, and writing. In these schools, the children of all resident parishioners of Bedford's 5 parishes are entitled to receive gratuitous instruction. In the national school, 25 boys are clothed from a fund left by Alderman Newton of Leicester. The warden and fellows of New College, Oxford, are visitors, and appoint the master and second master of the grammar school. There are 4 masters, viz. The head, with 2 assistant masters, a mathematical master, and a writing master. The scholars enjoy the advantage of 8 exhibitions, of £80 per annum each, 6 of which must be bestowed on town boys. The remaining 2 may go to boarders. The cheap and good education attainable as a matter of right in this borough have rendered it a favourite resort of half-pay officers and unbeneficed clergymen blessed with large families. The church of St. Paul is large, with a nave and a south aisle divided by early English piers and arches. A stone pulpit, ornamented with gilt tracery on a blue background, has been removed in favour of an oak tree with the chancel. The church of St. Peter has an old Norman door, a fine antique front, and some curious stained glass in the windows. John Bunyan, author of The Pilgrim's Progress, was co-pastor in a Baptist meeting house in Mill Lane from 1671 until his death in 1688. The chair in which he used to sit is still preserved in the vestry as a relic. A few miles from Bletchley is a forgotten but once celebrated spot. Denby Hall, over which the traveller whirls without notice, yet worthy of remembrance, because it affords a name and date for tracing the march of railway enterprise. In 1838, a gap in the intended railway from London to Birmingham extended from an obscure public house called Denby Hall to Rugby. At either point, travellers had to exchange the rail for the coach or chaise. On June 28, 1838, when Queen Victoria was crowned, For days before the coronation, the coaches for the intermediate space were crammed. The chaises and post horses were monopolized, and at length, to cover 30-odd miles, every gig, standing wagon, cart, and donkey cart that could be obtained in the district was engaged. And yet many were disappointed of their journey to London. On this London and Birmingham line, in addition to, and without disturbing the ordinary traffic, 2,000 souls have been conveyed in one train at the rate of 30 miles an hour. Truly, Queen Victoria can set the railway conquests of her reign against the glories of the war victories of Queen Anne and her grandfather, King George. The Bucks Railway. A recent extension from Bletchley traverses Buckinghamshire, and by Fork, which commences at Winslow, passes through Buckingham and Brackley to Banbury by one line, and by Bicester to Oxford at the other. We need not pause at Brackley or Winslow. Buckingham is notable chiefly as being on the road to princely, palatial Stowe, the seat of the Buckingham family, now shorn of its internal glories in pictures, sculptures, carvings, tapestries, books, and manuscripts. Its grounds and gardens, executed on a great scale in the French style, only remain to delight the traveller. These would require and have been often described in illustrated volumes. Here we shall not dwell upon the melancholy scene of grandeur, power, and wealth frittered away in ignoble follies. Banbury. Banbury is more celebrated than worth seeing. Commercial travellers consider it one of the best towns in England, as it is a sort of metropolis to a great number of thriving villages. Banbury cakes are known wherever English children are bred, and to them, when not educated in too sensible a manner, the Homeric ballad of "Ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross" is sung. Unfortunately, the Puritans in the time of Edward VI pulled this famous cross down. They were in great force there, for as drunken Barnaby in his tour tells us, "There I found a Puritan one, hanging of his cat on Monday, for killing of a rat on Sunday." At Banbury was fought, after the English fashion, one of the great fights that preceded the carrying of the Reform Bill. Previous to that change, 16 electors had the privilege of sending a member to Parliament. During the Reform excitement, 6 of these privileged gentlemen seceded from their usual compact and determined to set up on their own account. For want of a better man, they pitched upon Mr. Easthorpe of the Morning Chronicle. Since that period, much to his own astonishment, no doubt, pitchforked into baronetcy. The old original MP was Colonel Hutchinson, the companion of Sir Robert Wilson in carrying off Levelet. On entering the town, 10,000 reformers set up such a howling that Colonel Hutchinson, thinking his last hour at hand, drew a dagger. Upon which more groans and shrieks followed, with such threats as made it prudent for the friends of the colonel to compel him to retreat. Under these circumstances, the streets of the town were crammed full with the excited mob. The poll was opened, and 6, amid tremendous plaudits, voted for Easthorpe and Reform, and 10 very discreetly stayed at home, and thus by 6 votes, a baronetcy was secured to the unopposed candidate. It is droll to look back upon the movement which led public opinion to prefer a stock jobber to a gallant soldier. Banbury manufactures horse girths and other kinds of webbing, as well as excellent ale. There are 2 inns, both good. The Buckinghamshire Railway has reduced the price of coal to the inhabitants from 22 shillings to 15 shillings per ton on 150,000 tons per annum. Bicester is 13 miles by the road from Oxford, a town as ancient as the Heptarchy, famous for a well once sacred and dedicated to St. Edburg, for its well-attended markets and cattle fairs, and especially for its excellent ale. It is in the centre of a capital hunting country. The women make a little bone lace. Oxford. Oxford is one of the great gates through which our rich middle classes send their sons to be amalgamated with the landed and titled aristocracy, who are all educated either there or at Cambridge. To say of anyone that he is an Oxford man at once implies that he is a gentleman, and when a well-looking, well-mannered, and even moderately endowed young gentleman has passed respectably through his curriculum at Christchurch or Magdalen, Balliol, Oriel University, or any of the other correct colleges, it rests with himself whether he runs the race of public life in England on equal terms with the sons of the oldest of the titled and untitled aristocracy, even though his father were an eminent retired dust contractor, and his mother laundry maid or factory girl. But money alone won't do it, and the pretension, the display, the coxcombry permitted in a peer must be carefully avoided by a parvenu. Thus Oxford interests classes who care very little for its educational, antiquarian, or architectural resources, as one of the institutions of the country by which any capable man may cut off his plebeian entail and start, according to the continental term, noble. The material beauty of Oxford is great. The situation, in a rich valley bounded by softly flowing rivers, fine. The domes and spires and old grey towers rising in clusters prepare the mind of the approaching traveller for the city where the old colleges and churches, planting out and almost composting it, afford at every bend of the long streets, at every turn of the narrow thoroughfares, some grand picture, or some charming architectural effect. Even our Quakers are proud of Oxford in England when they travel in America. Then Oxford is so decorously clean, so spotlessly free from the smoke of engines and the roar of machinery. The groves and gardens, and trim green turf seen through the richly carved and corbelled archways, give such a feeling of calm study and pleasant leisure, that we will defy the bitterest radical and the sourest dissenter not to be softened and charmed by its first impressions. To those who have arrived prepared to be pleased, stored with associations of the past, fortunate enough to have leisure and introductions to some affable don long resident, and proud to display the treasures and glories of his beloved alma mater, Oxford affords for many days a treat such as no other city in the world can supply to an Englishman. The best-known route from London is by the Great Western Railway, which according to the original plan would have passed close to the city. But all the university and ecclesiastical dignitaries were up in arms. They saw in their mind's eye the tender, innocent undergraduates flying from the proctor-guarded precincts, where modesty, virtue, and sobriety ever reign, to the vice-haunted purlieus of London at all hours of the night and day. The proctors and professors triumphed. The railway was obliged to leave a gap of 10 miles of common road between its invading, unhallowed course and the sacred city, and great was the rejoicing of the convocation chamber, and many the toasts in the senior common rooms to the health of the faithful sons of Oxon, when Parliament had saved the city from this commercial desecration. But even as Grosvenor Square was at length glad to admit gas after abiding longest all in the genteel gloom of oil lamps, so was Oxford in the end glad to be put on a branch, as it could not be put on a main line. And now beside the rail on which we are travelling, Worcester, Banbury, and Wolverhampton, and 2 roads to London and Birmingham are open to the wandering tastes of the callow youth of the university, as may be ascertained by statistical return from the railway stations, whenever a steeplechase or Jenny Lind concert takes place in or near any of the towns enumerated. The entrance from Bletchley is perhaps the finer. as rolling round a semicircle we sweep into sight of the dome of Radcliffe Library and the spire of St. Mary's Church. Descend, enter the city by Cheltenham Road, and passing through an inferior suburb reach the head of High Street, of which a great Germanic art critic declared had it not its equal in the whole world. Wide, long, and gently curving, approached from either end, it presents in succession the colleges of Lincoln, Brasenose, University, All Souls, Queen's, St. Mary's Church, with peeps of gardens, with private houses, and with shops which do not detract, but rather add to the dignity and weight of the grand old buildings. Having slowly sauntered up and down and scanned the various characters peculiar to the city of universities, as for instance an autocrat in the person of a dean of Christchurch, a principal of Balliol, or a master of Jesus, a proctor newly made, but already endowed with something of the detective police expression, several senior fellows, plump, shy, proud, and lazy, walking for an appetite, and looking into the fishmongers on their way to the parks, a cocky master of arts just made and hastening to call on all his friends and tradesmen to show off his new dignity and rustle the sleeves of his new gown. 3 lads just entered from a public school. Last month they laid out Tippin Mother Brown's tarts, on their way to order 3 courses and dessert at the Mater, where the very indifferent fare is provided for fashionable credit prices. A pale student, after Dr. Pusey's own heart, in cap and gown, pacing monk-like along, secretly telling his beads. A tuft nobleman, lounging out of the shop of a tailor, who, as he follows his lordship to the door, presents the very picture of a dean bowing to a prime minister, when a bishop is very sick. A few ladies are seen in care of papas in caps in towns, or mammas, who look as if they were doctors of divinity, or deserve to be. The Oxford female is of only 2 kinds, prim and brazen. The latter we will not describe. The former seem to live in perpetual fear of being winked at, and are indescribable. From these street scenes, where the ridiculous only is salient, for the quiet and gentlemanly pass by unnoticed, while pompous dons and coxcombal undergraduates are as certain of attention as turkey-cocks and bantams, we will turn into the solemn precincts of a few of the colleges. At the head stands the Christchurch in dignity and size, founded by Cardinal Wolsey, Pope Clement VII, consenting in 1525 on the revenues of some dozen minor monasteries, under the title of Cardinal College. The fall of Wolsey, England's last cardinal, until by the invitation of modern medieval Oxford, Pius IX sent us a wise man, stopped the works. One of Wolsey's latest petitions to Henry was that his college at Oxford might go on, and by the king, after some intermediate changes, it was finally established as Christchurch. The foundation now consists of a dean, 8 canons, 8 chaplains, a schoolmaster, an organist, 8 choristers, and 101 students, of whom a considerable number are exhibitionists from a Westminster school. It is in symbolism of these students that the celebrated Great Tom of Christchurch clangs each evening 101 times. Besides these students, there are generally nearly 1,000 independent members, consisting of noblemen, gentlemen commoners, and commoners. To be a gentleman commoner of Christchurch, all other advantages being equal, is the most correct thing in the university. None can compete with them unless it be the gentlemen commoners of Magdalen. The Christchurch noblemen, or tufts, are considered the leaders of fashion, whether it be in medieval furniture or rat hunting, boating or steeplechase riding, old politics or new religions. Among the illustrious men it claims as pupils are Sir Philip Sidney and Ben Jonson, Camden and South, Bolingbroke and Lock, Canning and Sir Robert Peel, whom Oxford rejected. The front is in Aldgate Street, for which consult Mr. Spear's pretty guide card, the entrance under the lofty clock tower, whence, at 10 minutes past 9 every evening, the mighty Tom peals forth his sonorous summons. The Tom gateway leads into the quadrangle, familiarly termed Quad, 264 feet by 261. The dimensions originally planned by Wolsey, but the buildings which bound it on 3 sides were executed after the destruction of the old edifice in the Great Civil Wars, from designs by Sir Christopher Wren in 1688. The hall on the south side is ancient. We ascend to it by a flight of steps under a handsome groined roof, supported by a single pillar. The hall is 115 feet long, 40 wide and 50 high. The open roof of oak richly carved, decorated with the arms of Wolsey and Henry VIII. Other carvings adorn the fireplace and a fine bay window. On the sides of the rooms are hung a series of 120 portraits of ecclesiastical poets, philosophers, these a few, statesmen and noblemen, representing distinguished students of the college. The dinner hour, when the dean and chief officers sit in state on the dais, masters and bachelors at the side tables, and undergraduates at the lower end, is an impressive sight, recalling feudal times. The feeding is the worst of any in Oxford, much to the advantage of the taverns and pastry cooks. When in 1566 Queen Elizabeth visited Oxford, a play was performed before her in this hall by the students, in the course of which a cry of hounds belonging to themselves, having been counterfeited in the quadrangle, the students were seized with a sudden transport, whereat Her Majesty cried it out, "Oh, excellent! These boys are in very truth ready to leap out of the window to follow the hounds." Amid the many changes of taste and opinion since the days of Queen Bess, the love of hunting still prevails in Christchurch. Not one of the least healthy tastes in the age of perpetual competing work. And the Christchurch drag is one of the stock amusements anathematized toward the end, and permitted at the benefit of every hunting term, for the glory of the chief tuft, and the benefit of hard-reading men. They cannot waste their time in trotting from cover to cover, dependent on the vagaries of such an uncertain animal as a fox, and are therefore content to hunt a cad, armed with a red herring over the stiffest country he can pick. After the hall, the kitchen should be visited. It is the most ancient part of the building, for Wolsey, with a truly ecclesiastical appreciation of the foundation of all sound learning, began with the kitchen, and it survived him. Agriculture, gardening, cooking, and confectionery were among the civilizing arts brought to great perfection by the religious houses, and lost for a long period after the Reformation, which, like other strong medicines, cleared our heads at the expense of our stomachs. At Wolsey's kitchen may be seen the huge gridiron on which our ancestors roasted sheep whole, and prepared other barbarous, disgusting dishes. In the Pickwater quadrangle are to be found the library and the Guy's collection of pictures, which contain curious specimens of that early school, which mad medievalists are now fond of imitating, and a few examples of the famous Italian masters who rose on the force of genius, which did not disdain study, but did disdain imitation. Wycliffe was a warden and Sir Thomas More a student in Canterbury Hall, which was amalgamated in Wolsey's College. The chapel of Christchurch is the Cathedral of Oxford. The oldest parts belong to the church of St. Frideswide's Priory, consecrated in AD 1180. Wolsey pulled down 50 feet of the nave and adapted it to the use of his college. The stained glass windows, without which every Gothic cathedral has a bare, naked, cold appearance, and which were peculiarly fine, nearly all fell a sacrifice to puritanical bigotry. For the many curious and beautiful architectural features we must refer in this instance, as in all others, to the architectural guides such as Parker's, with which everyone who feels any interest in the subject will provide himself. Leaving Christchurch by the Canterbury Gate up Merton Lane, we pass on one hand Corpus Christi, founded in the reign of Henry VIII, where Bishop Sewell, author of the Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity, and Richard Hooker, a Protestant, whom even a pope praised, were bred, and on the other Oriel, where studied Walter Raleigh, one of England's greatest men, a poet and philosopher, soldier and statesman, mariner and historian. Not guiltless, yet worthy of pity in his fall and long imprisonment, and of honour in his brave and Christian death, the victim of the ever-feeble, treacherous Stuarts. What other line of kings has had the fate to sign away the lives of two such men as Raleigh and Strafford? Oriel also claims as student Prynne, who with his libels in his ears laid the foundation of our liberty of the press. Bishop Butler, whose analogy showed how logic and philosophy could be applied to support the cause of Christian truth. Dr. Arnold, the reformer of our modern school system, whom Oxford persecuted during life and honoured in death. And lastly, the clever, crotchety Archbishop Whately, who has not only proved that Napoleon Bonaparte never existed, but that Mr. Gibbon Wakefield's bankrupt schemes of colonization were triumphant successes. Next we come to Merton, the most ancient of all the colleges, founded 7th of January 1264. The oldest of its buildings now standing is the library, the oldest in England, erected 1377. Wycliffe was a student of Merton. University College, which next falls in our way, claims to date from King Alfred, but has no charters so ancient as those of Merton. The buildings are not more early than Charles I, but the chapel contains some of Grinling Gibbon's best carvings, and a monument by Flaxman of Sir William Jones, who was a fellow of this university. The modern part, fronting High Street, is from the designs of Barry, the architect of the Palace of Westminster. University College has one of the old customs, of which several are retained in Oxford, called chopping at the tree. On Easter Sunday, a bough is dressed up with flowers and evergreens, and laid on a turf by the buttery. After dinner, each member, as he leaves the hall, takes up a cleaver and chops at the tree, and then hands over a largesse to the cook who stands by with a plate. The contribution is, for the master, half a guinea, the fellows 5 shillings, and other members half a crown each. In like manner, at Queen's College, which stands opposite the university, on Christmas Day a boar's head is brought into the hall in procession, while the old carol is sung. The boar's head in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary, and I pray you, my masters, be merry. Quig estus in convivio, caput epre defrerio, reres laudes domino. While on New Year's Day the bursar presents to every member a needle and threads, with the word, "Take this and be thrifty." We have not been able to obtain a statistical return of the standing of the Queen's men in the books of tradesmen of Oxford, as compared with members of other colleges. But we recommend the question to Mr. Newdigate, some other Oxonian figuremonger. This college was founded by Philippa, Queen of Edward III. It was directed by the statutes that there should be 12 fellows and 70 poor scholars, who were to be summoned to dinner by the sound of a trumpet. When the fellows, clothed in scarlet robes, were to sit and eat, while the poor scholars, kneeling in token of humility, were to dispute in philosophy. The kneeling, disputing, and scarlet robes have been discontinued, but the trumpet still sounds to dinner. There are usually about 300 members on the books of this college. Lower down the high street is All Souls, whose two towers are picturesque centres of most views of Oxford. The buildings are various in character and merit, and well worth examination. The Grand Court was designed by Hawksmoor rather on the principles of a painter than an architect. He wished it to make a good picture with the existing buildings, and he succeeded. All Souls is composed entirely of fellows who elect from other colleges whose qualifications consist in being Benenate, Benevestiti, et Moderator, Doctor in Arte Musica. With so easy a qualification of having been well-born, well-dressed, and able to sing the old 100th Psalm, Old King Cole or Kilrodery, it may be imagined that All Souls has never done anything to disturb the minds of kings, cabinets, or reviewers, or even of the musical critics. Pleasant gentlemanly fellows when they do get into Parliament, it is usually as the advocates of deceased opinions. Had Jonas Southcote been genteel, the fellows of All Souls and some other colleges would have continued Joanna Southcotians 50 years after her decease. All Souls too has its legend and its commemorative ceremony. The diggers of the foundations found in an old drain a monstrous mallard, a sort of alderman among wild ducks, thriving and growing fat amid filth. On being cooked, he was found first-rate. And in memory of this treasure trove and of the Foundation Day, annually on the 14th of January, the best mallard that can be found is brought in state, and all the mallardians chanting, "Oh, the swapping, swapping mallard," etc. And on that slightly strange note, I think I'm going to call it there. This is a delightfully boring read, so I doubt you really want to pick up where I'm leaving off. But if you do, you can, as always, find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.